Hello everyone，大家好，我是艾文，来自以色列的 Riskified。我这个会议我会做英语，可是有点技术的字我就翻译到中文。我以前住在上海，然后2019年回以色列，加入 Riskified。我是 Director of Business Development，就是业务拓展总监。现在住特拉维夫。So today, what we'll talk about will be Riskified's role in the payment ecosystem. I know that we're talking about banking here, and we have friends from the banking industry. So we'll try to show a different kind of angle of how it means to do fraud prevention in the banking industry and how it relates to merchants, to the 商户, to the basically the e-commerce stores. So first of all, a bit about Riskified. So we were a startup. We were founded in 2013 in Tel Aviv in an apartment that you see a lot of books. 就是我听说过中国人说，犹太人就喜欢看书，所以这个有点像。So this is our first office. 2013 started only from reviewing for big e-commerce players, only the really trash transactions, only the riskiest transactions they have. And we said, if we approve the transaction, we also give you a guarantee liability shift. So they didn't have anything to lose. So they chose us to start with the riskiest transactions. From there, we continue to really review. Almost all our merchants are submit all merchants, meaning that they work with us on all their volume today. But when we started, we wanted to really have an entry to the market. So we started with the riskiest ones. So today we're a public company in the New York Stock Exchange from 2021. We have a lot of employees, 750, and really opened different offices around the world. We are reviewing, as you can see, where we started 2012 or 2013. Today we're IPO'd, and we have 750 employees and more. Continue to recruit. We opened offices both in Latin America and also in Asia Pacific. Our headquarters, 我们总部就在新加坡，在亚太，全世界的总部是在以色列特拉维夫。But we're headquartered in Asia Pacific in Singapore. And just a bit about how it works, how we are able to guarantee transactions, even if they are risky. Basically, how it works in terms of technology is Riskified provides API decisions at the time of checkout after the consumer is pressing pay on the e-commerce website. We provide them instantly, approve or decline. If we approve the transaction and it came back as a chargeback, we reimburse the merchant for the liability and take liability on us. If we decline the transaction, we don't charge. So the way it works, and this business model was important to explain also the technology, the way it works is that we have real-time decisioning based on our machine learning models. 机器学习模型就给我们决策 approve 或者 decline. So these decisions are based on the models, but also on elastic linking of different data points within our merchant network, meaning that merchant A decisions can influence our merchant B decisions, of course, anonymous, while taking into account the former chargebacks, the previous chargebacks, or let's say, I know that in Taiwan we say 假期, in some places it's 起家. So the 起家取付, we also have this data. So we use the historical transactions of chargebacks versus good customers to come up with the decisions. Now, remember, 100% of our transactions are chargeback guaranteed. So we always need to maintain performance control to make sure that we're not being attacked by organized fraud, like we say, fraud rings, 诈骗团伙, and then make sure that we retrain our models accordingly. So next time the same merchant will be attacked by a fraud ring, we'll be able to stop that. And for example, the fraud ring can be also very sophisticated to really take over account, 账户盗用. And then if someone was being taken over, next time when he already got his account back to the legit owner, we will be able to know, okay, now we need to approve this transaction because the account was being returned to the lawful owner and we don't want to decline them. If we decline them, we don't charge. So a lot of data points go into this equation, and eventually the decisions are being made instantly. So that's how it works. And in terms of products, so we started, of course, with the chargeback guarantee product at checkout we talked about, but also we really expanded according to the merchant's demand, to our merchant's demand, to also account secure, preventing fraud at login, preventing account takeover, also to policy protect, really protecting the merchants from policy abuse, like coupons abuse, and also refund abuse, return, not legitimate return that abuse the system, and of course payment optimization. So we will touch upon payment really soon. So just to recap, we have more than 750 people in the company, employees globally, and I think the two data that we are proud of the most are 50%, more than 50% of our employees are in R&D, and we almost don't have churn from our merchants. We work with some of the biggest logos in the world, some of the biggest public companies in the world that needs to maintain a healthy chargeback rate, healthy approval rate, achieve more revenue, expand to new industries. So let's touch back on, really recap what we do. We prevent fraud, and by the fact that we are chargeback guarantee, we lift the revenue. We approve more transactions than what the merchant would have approved themselves. We also reduce friction because we don't use, and this is important for the rest of the talk, we don't use 3D secure at all. We don't use the 验证 method, and it's all frictionless. And we also protect from account takeovers. So in terms of, let's try to really return to what the merchants care about, because we are from the banking industry. We're trying to look at what the merchants and consumers, in their turn, care about. So first of all, they want to fulfill as many orders as possible, right? They want to accept payments in different places. Like in Taiwan, you have e-wallets. In other places in LATAM, you need to accept different installment methods, and you need to accept debit card and credit card. Each of these payment methods have their own risk profile, and they have their own behavior of consumers versus fraudsters. So it's very hard and nuanced to recognize what is a fraudster and what is a legit consumer. And we want to return the customers. We want them to come back to us. An airline in Asia, they probably want to keep their D2C, direct to consumer volume, higher than the volume that go to the OTA, to keep data, to keep loyalty of customers. Now let's take as a case study the case of PSD2, the regulation in Europe, in the EEA, in the European Council. So in 2020, we had a new regulation in Europe. It really came into effect, enforcement in December 2020. And basically what they said, we want to reduce fraud. How we're going to do it? Mostly by SCA, strong customer authentication. So we in Asia always try to learn from other places. We will learn from this lesson. What were the results? Of course, it's still happening. Things are evolving, things are innovating. But basically, we have SCA, this strong customer authentication, that can be many things, but mostly it's 3DS, 3D secure. So according to our data, 3D secure mostly hurt conversion and brings to higher friction. And eventually you have a lot of, you as a merchant have a lot of drop off from your cart. People that are 就你的流失率就高一点，如果有 3DS 的话。So we have this friction, but also we want to protect from fraud, right? We don't want fraudsters to penetrate our defenses of the website. But also we need to look on top of fraud and friction balance. We also want to look at authorization rate on the bank side, and this is very important, how it affects the authorization rate. So first of all, the biggest question until now, we're in end of 2022, is it working? Is the PSD2 working? So the answer is, like many answers, more complicated than yes or no. But we try to take really a survey from merchants, the merchant's voice, right? So the merchant's voice, they basically say 32% of them, they say, and this is a 第三方 survey, 调查, and what they say is 32% say that PSD2 is more complicated than they expected. And by the way, this includes both 3DS 2.x and 3DS 1. And 34% agree that actually they try to exempt, they try to homien, to make a homien of the PSD2 when possible. They try to bypass it and create a frictionless experience for the merchant. And this is very important because they have the regulation, let's say above every transaction above 500 euros goes directly to SCA, mandatory. But everything in below that can be exempted. So they try to exempt as much as possible. They want to avoid the 3DS, both 1 and 2. So this is a quote for an actual merchant, a pretty big merchant in Europe that say, and this is important, they don't say I don't like 3DS. They have 3DS already, but they say we as a merchant, we have 600 rules, 就几规则的反欺诈就规则 rules. And actually down the stream, the bank and the acquirer and no one gets them. They actually ignore them when they do the 3DS, when they do the SCA. So we are trying to really understand what's happening here. So the way you see it, the problem is around misaligned regulatory constraints, meaning that the regulation is really not 100% aligned, to say the least, with what merchants and what consumers, cardholders, want. This is one. And the second is that we have data issues. Some of the data, because we have a flow, we have a payment flow, some of the data don't go downstream to the banks. So when we are talking about misaligned regulatory constraints, basically every player in the flow, from the consumer to the issuing bank at the end, they have a different game. So each one of these players, instead of creating this unified strategy against fraud, each one optimized for their own benefit and really reduce their own fraud rate. So we'll have a deep dive now of what it means. But the second issue, the data issues, just to recap, we have important data that is not going downstream, and most importantly, the context of the data from the top funnel of the payment is lost. It's not going downstream. So what you get at the end, at the bank side, is a lot of inaccurate decision making. So let's try to really take it step by step. We have the consumer, we have the merchant, we have the really the PSP, acquirer, network. Network, when I say network, is probably Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, and the issuing bank at the end. So first of all, the consumer. What the consumer and the fraudster, by the way, cares most about is accept as many payments as possible and really don't hurt my top line, especially in different economic situations, and don't give me friction. Consumers tend to say that 3DS is a conversion killer, so they try to avoid that. If they travel, if they don't get the SMS on their phone, so they just lose a transaction and they go to buy somewhere else, if it's possible. But also fraudsters also don't want friction, so we always have this 平衡 of this balance of fraudsters versus legit customers. Let's move to the merchant. The merchant, of course, cares about accepting more good orders and incurring minimal risk. In terms of data, what they care about is having a uniform data that they can use across the platform, and really highest quality data, and have the best decisions. They don't want to deal with a consumer complaining, saying, I was wrongfully declined, to the customer service, or just drop off to another website, to another competitor. So let's look at really, we talked about downstream data, we talked about regulatory constraints. So we have this order. We see the data points in this order, and we see that it's a low value order. It's only 3 euros. So on the top of things, it seems like a good order. It seems like we will not want to decline it because it's such a low order. So the 3DS is looking, and as I said, they are missing a lot of the context. The 3DS is looking at this, and actually they approve it. The merchant, when they tested it before PSD2 came into place, they declined it because they have more context, they have more data on the consumer than what downstreams to the bank. You can see the data points here. It's a very bad IP behavior. The language is US, but the billing info is in France. And you have a connection type. But remember, the bank and the 3DS engine looks at rules. They don't look at really a breathing method of reviewing transactions. And then they miss the context. They miss a lot of the context. You can see in purple that a lot of the context is missing, and especially what explains the IP and billing mismatch. So basically, the 3DS approves this transaction. So now we know also the 3DS is not fraud proof. Now you might think for the first if it's only 3 euros, but fraudsters always look for a hole, for a lodon in your fraud experience. So they would try with 3 euros. In a week from now, they see that no chargeback was issued and the transaction was approved. They will try with 300 euros to really bypass the 3DS. So let's move to really the next player, the PSP. What the PSP cares about is basically to provide value to their merchants. This is a very saturated market. They don't want to lose the merchant. They want the merchant to be happy, and the merchant will be happy if the consumer is happy and get less friction. They have a lot of data access, these PSP, but the problem is, and we know that from big data, it doesn't matter your data set size, it matters what you do with it. So would the gateway add benefit to the consumers and to the merchants? So they are in the middle, this gateway. Then we go to the acquirer. In the PSD2 environment, the acquirer also have a lot of burden on their back. They also need to maintain their own fraud levels in a certain threshold that the EEA, the European Council, really determines for them. So they want to bundle a lot of merchants, risky and not risky merchants or less risky merchants, together and have a bundle of a low fraud rate. So basically, merchants that are less risky will be hurt because the acquirer wants to reduce their own fraud rate. So this is the acquirer, and really the data that they get, it's a mix and match. It's not something really clear and unified across merchants. Different merchants give them different data according to their own risk management platform. Then we move to really the network, Visa, MasterCard. Visa, MasterCard actually are aligned with what consumers want. They want to approve as many transactions as possible and try to really bypass themselves. We see in PSD2, they try to bypass the SCA, the Strong Customer Authentication, the Yanzhen. So they try, for example, to do it with delegated SCA, which is a bypass. They have enhanced data, but it's also limited. It depends on the upstream data from the beginning of the flow with the merchant. Then we have the issuer, the issuing bank. they are not well aligned. They are liable for the transactions, but the interchange rates in the EEA are not that high, so they don't make a lot of money from them. And the data is not used for merchant data. They're not using it at all. So at the end of the downstream, the issuing bank, they have a lot of declines that are legit, that are customers, legit customers that are getting declined. Just to really look at the details, we look at authentication data as this is really important. We have the Yanzheng, we have the ACS, and we have the Shoutren, the 3DS, the authorization. Basically, according to these rules, and you see all this table of rules, the data from the authentication stage is not fully even going to the authorization stage. So they just get at the end for the authorization, for the Shoutren, they get authenticated, not authenticated. So even more context is lost. So a lot of declines are happening there. We can look at this transaction. This is where exemption was requested. The engine of the bank declined it, and the transaction dropped. This consumer went to buy somewhere else. But we see that the identity was really good. The order details had no problem. It was 200 euros, and it dropped anyway. So this is a decline that is falsified. This should have been approved as frictionless flow. And just to recap, we have issuing bank have a lot of merchants, and we also have the merchant have a lot of issuers. So the issuer has to work with numerous merchants with different profile, while the merchants, they have to understand that they have different issuers. So what's in it for the issuing bank to actually try to come up with better strategy for authentication and authorization than 3DS? And this is the most important part. So basically, they want less angry customers. They want happier customers, complain less to the issuing side, to the issuing bank customer service, and get less friction, less overhead. And they want happier merchants, right? You want especially the cross-border merchants when the bank declines are really high to keep loyalty to the acquiring bank and to other places in the field. So just to recap, what we talk about is how merchants are using the constraints of PSD2 and what they're doing. So basically, they try to understand the constraints of PSD2. They want to anticipate failure. So each one of them are trying to calculate how much we're going to lose from this PSD2 regulation and how much we're already losing. And then they want to monitor what happens, and adjust. Really have more frictionless flow, avoid 3DS, try to really put more data downstream that the issuing bank will really see. So that's what's happening in the PSD2, and I hope we can learn from it for Yatai, for APAC, really expansion of frictionless business, and all of us can innovate and thrive. Thank you, everyone. 谢谢大家。